On this Mother's Day, Lenny McAllister. So I'm almost called you your nickname, but I'm gonna try to call you Lenny. I'm gonna be formal today and not call you by your nickname.
I appreciate
But it might still slip. That said, you and I did this exercise. We did this exercise about a month ago where I just threw into AI. I said, what are the odds of an individual overcoming and going back to school and getting a STEM degree at 53 years old? And it gave me pretty astronomical odds, saying this is really impressive. And then I just started compounding it. I said, okay, make the person a woman. Make the person a 53-year-old woman. Make the person a 53-year-old African-American woman. And then I added, the challenges that you've overcome in your childhood, teenage years, early 20s, and dropping out and having to drop out because of, people know about your domestic violence, survival, talking about that. And then I threw all those other layers on there and said, what are the odds now of this individual graduating? And the first thing AI came back with, you should be proud. And then I threw the GPA in there. Then I threw the awards in there. And AI literally said, I can't compute these. You know this as well as I do. You should be very proud. But how do you feel knowing that you're doing something that is, in many regards, just not typical, but you're living it? So it's one thing to objectively see the odds and be like, that's really cool. And then you're like, okay, well, crap, I still got to do this lab, and it's due at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's 2:30, and I'm tired, and I'm hungry, and I'm sore, and I want to go to sleep. What was that juggle, knowing you're doing something that's groundbreaking, but at the same exact time knowing that it's still me doing this, and I still have to actually put the work in?
Well, the first thing that came to mind when you started talking about this just now was that at one point in my educational journey, I was told that I was academically ineligible to return to a school.
I was there for that, too.
You were there for that. So starting with that, once I was told that, I felt like, wow, maybe I'm not smart enough to be a biology major, and definitely not smart enough to graduate from a university or college. So going back to school was a rough transition for me, because starting with the being told that I was academically ineligible and then deciding to go back to school, I had to overcome the fear that, well, maybe I'm not going to be able to do this coursework. Even if it's not biology or biological studies that I'm, doing, maybe I'm not good enough for this. Maybe I'm not equipped. So it took that first class that I took that was not biology related that helped me see, oh, you are able to learn. You can retain this information and you can test on it and make an A.
And I remember, so what people don't know, even many of our family members, is the fact that you were an IT major at one point in time.
Exactly.
That you had to literally take the next transition to, well, I've always loved biology. I was a little girl playing Operation with the board game when I was 3 and 4 years old. I've always wanted to be a biologist and do this level of science. And you had to take a leap of faith in yourself and overcome that self-doubt that you brought up to go from, let me take what is the safe route for me, to let me do something daring, which is really chasing the dream I've always had ever since I was a little girl. Talk a little bit about that journey in regards to overcoming self-doubt, because a lot of people that are looking to do their second act are going to look at your story and say, I need to have the ability to overcome my self-doubt the way Lenny McAllister overcame her self-doubt. And going from an IT major to biology, which not only was a harder major, but also lengthened the time that it was going to take for you to graduate, which is another consideration as a second act student. You overcame all of that. What was that journey like?
It was scary for me in the beginning. So once I decided that I wanted to go back to school, or transition from being an IT major into actually gaining my BS in biology, I looked at CCAC as an option. And what I ended up doing was enrolling in my first biology course, general bio course, because my credits from my previous school were too old. So I enrolled in that course, very nervous, very scared, thinking, okay, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to complete this class, let alone take I don't even know if I'm capable of taking a test in the classroom, you know. But I took that class and I had a wonderful professor um, who had already been to Galapagos, had traveled, had done all types of research. And I was like, wow, I can do this. And she made me feel like I could do it. And I did it. I made A's in the class. I did well in lab. And I ended up taking the second bio course at CCAC. And from there, I took A&P. And, I was like, I can really do this. I can actually do
All right,
this.
so hold up. For all the history majors out there, what does A&P stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry. Anatomy and physiology. So I took parts 1 and 2 there.
If you all only understood how many times I've had to ask these type of questions to her, you would understand that she's a saint in addition to being an award winner in biology. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But in the middle of taking it, so I was able to overcome the fear and, and the somewhat imposter syndrome that seems to, come along with being scared and to go back to college. And the pandemic hits.
Yes.
So we have to transition from being in the classroom to being online, which was a whole nother just set of things I had to, figure out how to navigate, which I was able to overcome. And then I had to figure out a way from there, because as a biology major, a lot of the courses that are offered during the day. So I had to figure out a way to be able to go to classes during the day and as well as work a full-time job. And that's when working overnights on the weekend came in. I was literally working 3 12-hour shifts on the weekend and going to classes full-time during the week. And it seems like it would be, it's something that's doable in theory, but when you think about the labs that you have to take and this is real science, the information that you have to retain, it's a lot. I wasn't able to do homework on the weekends like I really needed
because
to do.
you're in an ICU where there are people that are they're on the line of life or death sometimes.
Exactly.
So you have to do your job. It's not just you're kind of sitting in a corner someplace at a hospital. You're literally, part of what you're doing is you're helping the staff monitor people that are going through multiple situations. And I mean, again, I'm married to you. You're looking at 1 or 2 patients right across from your desk that is in your purview as well.
Right.
So it's not like you could sit there and study for 12 hours overnight quietly because you're watching something that's benign.
Right, because there were times that, all hands on deck. Everyone needs to help out in some capacity, whether it be just making sure that the family members that are there are taken care of or going to get supplies. There was never a huge block of time where I could study on the weekends. So I was always trying to figure out, how do I get time to study? How do I figure out family time? And, you need sleep. At some point you have to sleep. So it was rough navigating all of that.
But I got to ask you this before we go to commercial break, because I saw it and I told you it was one of the most beautiful things that I got a chance to experience. And I mean that. I saw that love that you've had for science since you were a little girl come out in this 40-year-old woman. And it keep growing and growing and growing. Because honestly, you could have done all this work and got aggravated and said, why am I doing this? I don't even like this stuff anymore. I don't even know why I'm going back to school at 50, 51, 52 years old. Instead, I saw this love for what you were doing just continuously grow. Talk about how going through a second act allows you to reclaim that lost love. Because people don't realize that about going through a second act, that you could discover this is why I've always loved this. This is truly who I am. I mean, you graduating as an IT major would have been one thing. I'd have been proud of you. But graduating as a biology major and then excelling the way you wanted to excel, that is who Lannie is. And I got to see that reemerge in real time. Talk about what that was like being that person through that reemergence.
I had to remind myself throughout the journey to enjoy the journey. And you're right. I've always loved science. And, I could have stuck with the IT major, and, if I were just purely in it for money and just wanting to get a degree so I can make more money in the field.
And just simply get out of school as fast as you can.
Just get out of school as fast as I could just so I can make money.
We won't say which part of this couple did that, but we digress. Go ahead.
But, even when I was not in school, I was always reading journals.
Yes.
I was always studying
Yes, you were.
some type of research, something,
And let me before we go to break, I want to talk about that because you were doing that before you went back to school. You were doing that in your 30s when our kids were younger. You were doing that when we were moving from North Carolina to the south side of Chicago and then coming here to Pittsburgh. You were still being a scientist without being in school. And so you were able to envision that second act before you actually stepped back on a campus, which I think was fascinating to see.
Yes, I was absolutely able to envision it. Beyond the fear, I was able to envision myself being in the classroom, being able to accomplish what I had set out to accomplish. That young lady who graduated from high school, who had her future in front of her, I had envisioned myself moving on and accomplishing, getting that biology degree.
Let's go to commercial break. I listen, like I told you all, the reason why I wanted to do this is I live this. This is my life. But when it's your life and there's something amazing and magical and inspiring as part of it, it doesn't resonate quite the same way because it's like, well, it's just my life. Well, as you're hearing, I'm married to a very special woman, and I want to continue to have this conversation because I think you have a story that will inspire many, many people out there, including the mothers that are looking for second acts on Mother's Day, including the young girls that may have stubbed their toe in life like you did. For them to be able to see that they can do it, I think is magical and amazing, and it's something they need to hear more of. So hang on to your thoughts. Again, Lenny McAllister speaking to the better half of the McAllisters, Lenny McAllister, here on News Radio KDK.